Ninja! Ninja!
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America. This is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on and behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to our daily gun show. Coming live weeknights at midnight Eastern. We talk about guns for about 60 minutes. All right, so what's today? 28th. And if we were to look over at the calendar today, we would find that it is the anniversary of the so today, the 28th was Arizona becoming the second state to get a state gun. We got the Colt Single Action Army, the Colt SSA. Tomorrow is the anniversary of the LA riots. Damn, that would have been a good day to go to LA. So, no, I took all my hard drives out. So I don't have pictures of when I went there and looked at them. I wonder if I have the video. I might have the video of it. So I guess we'll just screen capture here. Go over to the YouTube. See if I got that video up there or not. Ghosts out there.
Let's talk about
ATPs out there.
Second Amendment. One of the best ways I've heard it described.
Let's type in riot and see what
So our
happens.
forefathers recognizing.
Riot. North Hollywood shootout. So it's a 3-minute video. I probably don't get into the riot there. So let's log in and see if I got. Oh, maybe I have it over on what's that other thing called Gunstreamer. See if I can find a video on Gunstreamer. Riot. A lot of videos came up with riot. Oh, look at that. It might be the video I'm looking for, though. So, thanks, Gunstreamer.
We started out the 2018 Gun Show Deploy Tour with the Angry Parade up in Phoenix, Arizona. As you saw, 10 to 15,000 people got together to demand that their rights be removed. One of their chants was, "Why would you want to own an AR-15? Well, our second stop on the tour was Los Angeles, the site of what I believe is one of the best reasons to own an AR-15, the 1992 South Central LA riots. The riots were incited by police brutality, racial tensions. They spread from South Central LA, causing $1 billion in damage, countless injuries, and many deaths. Law enforcement was ineffective in controlling the mob for 6 days. It started near the intersection of Florence and Normandy. About a block north of there, an incident took place in the neighborhood that angered the community who started.
Is that audio working or not? It looks like when I full screen, what the hell, it cuts off half of it. So I'm going to have to just leave it like this, I guess. I don't know if you can hear it or not, though, so I'll keep playing it.
To throw rocks at a police car.
So right here is where the Florence and Normandy. So that's about right over here. That's like a block down here, and this is where the first incident started. And then this is the main intersection where the guy gets pulled out of his truck and thrown rocks at and stuff. And then this parking lot that I'm parked in is the. It was low when I was playing the video. It's not low now, right? Thanks for the thumb, by the way. And that's Dead Horse out there. So I don't know. I guess I could throw links out here. I'll just do it like this. If anybody wants to jump in tonight, you can just jump in right there. Oh shit. And I'll delete that in a minute. Oh, I can block that user. I've got to be smarter. So, is still sound low to me? Really? Over here. Go to audio. This is the one, right? Yep, this is the one. Default. This is the one it should be on. Is this any better? So is this better? This is the one it should be on. It's not muted. Not muted. Anyway, so hopefully it still works. I just switched it. So this is the intersection where most of the stuff happened. And then when the hell was I there? I went there around this. It looks like it was May, so it was a little bit later than this.
That emboldened a growing mob who headed south to the intersection. That brought the media helicopters who focused on the violence. It also focused on the lack of the police presence in the area, and that brought out more criminals, more looting, more damages. Tom's Liquor here was the site of the beginning of those riots, which then moved north and into other neighborhoods. This is the intersection.
So where I was basically down this street and then like over a street or something. So it was just out of sight of this, really. I mean, another couple of blocks south of here. So this, oh no, it's even quieter. All right, so camera, audio. Oh, it should work with this one though. What did I have it on? These all say that. Can't be on that. Oh, it could be on this. Was it on this? That's probably this mic. This is probably really annoying. I did this on this mic. So there's a massive lag. Oh, there's Dead Horse. Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, it sounded louder than just now, whatever you did.
This sounds louder. This is the laptop, I think. So that's messed up. Here, so well, you're in here now. But if I do this and flip back to audio and then go to the thing that I paid $50 for, this doesn't sound any better. This sounds worse.
Well, you just had it on. I have to mute the StreamYard and then listen to it on YouTube, right? But
Okay.
whatever you just did before just sounded better.
That sounds better than where it is right now.
Let me hold on. I gotta mute this site and then go over 1 second.
All right, so then I'll just keep talking. So what we're looking at then is the pictures back from 92 when these guys got up on the roof of this, sort of like a mall. It's like a big building with a whole bunch of little stores in it. And then it's across the street from this Carl's Jr., and that's how I can tell where it is. And then, of course, there's all kinds of pictures of these people and everything. Make fun of them or what, but they're sitting up here with a couple of long arms in clear sight of that street. And that's the street where the billions of dollars worth of, arson was coming from. And the sight of them, people on a roof, was enough to stop a bunch of people from being crazy. Is that
That sounded pretty good over on YouTube.
Where we saw from the helicopters, rioters stopping traffic, pulling people out of their vehicles and leading them home.
Now this is a different place. This isn't the same place we were just on the roof of, but get the idea what it would look like from the street.
Almost to death. This is also where we saw people from the community rush out to render aid and to bring those people to safety. It was a horrible 6 days for Los Angeles. Now, because of the racial tension.
So that first picture where they're sitting on the roof with the shotguns, this is at the bottom of that building. So that's like a 2-3 story building, I guess. And this is about as close as I could get. I couldn't drive up on the roof of it. Well, into the parking garage and get to the roof of it.
Koreatown, which is just a few blocks north, saw businesses.
So like that Carl's Jr. would be at this intersection and to the left. Like that's how close it is.
Literally city blocks burning to the ground as the mob moved their way north.
Was the image of them being up on the roofs, was that enough to deter everyone, or did anyone actually shoot at anyone?
There were shootouts, but not at the place where I had the van there. That place, that far north, like all it was just the sight of them was enough to stop the mobs. That's what quieted the mobs down. So the first couple, there was firefights, but it was like a few individuals would come up and they would shoot at the they would say stop or whatever, and then the people would keep coming. They'd shoot at them, but nobody got killed. They would just shoot from the roof at them, and then once the mob started coming and saw the people, they knew it was effort. It was pointless. So that's what dispersed the mob. And I might be wrong, but that's the gist of what I did last year I did the research on this. So last year I was an expert. Now I can barely remember what happened. But from what I understand, there was a couple of skirmishes, but it wasn't like, from what I understand, it wasn't fire back and forth. It was just fire from the rooftops at people that were rioting, and then that dispersed everybody. Because it wasn't like, what's the word? Like, it wasn't like Tiananmen Square where people were like, resisting communism or something. So they'd taken up arms against the government. They were just rioting. So that they were throwing stuff on fire and killing people by lighting them on fire.
And looting, a lot of looting. Just
looting. But I'm saying they weren't like running around with like M2, belt-fed things shooting up back at people or anything. It wasn't like a armed rob or armed mob. It was just a murderous mob. If there's a difference, I'm just saying it wasn't like a military thing. It was so they weren't shooting at the people on the rooftops. From what I understand, it was just like an opportunity, more like, oh, we're out in the streets, we're rioting. It's not like they brought a rifle to go riot or whatever. Okay, so then Western, I don't know where we're at here.
Owners, employees, community members, they got together, they armed themselves, and they made their presence known to the mob by standing on the roofs of their businesses with their rifles.
So this one got burned down, and this is about halfway between where it started and where those people were on the roofs at. And I parked in the parking lot of this one. It's all rebuilt. So that's my picture standing there, and the van so parked over here. But you can see it's all rebuilt. Obviously, it's freaking decades ago, but rebuilt.
Conflicts were avoided completely with the presence of those firearms. The presence of an armed individual capable of defending their life and property with lethal force was enough to turn back even a mob mentality at a time where there seemed to be no rule of law.
Can you hear it?
Is from the California market, where we
it sounds really low to me. Like I can, but I got kind of crappy speakers, but
it's this computer. It won't really get louder than this. I'm saying really good stuff though. Really good insight.
Boulevard in Vermont, which is just south of the University of California campus. The donut shop is gone now from that iconic picture from the rise, but that area is now rebuilt. So hopefully our visits to this area, affected by the 1992 temporary, lawless, lethal riot, will illustrate how effective and valuable private ownership of the AR-15 and similar rifles can be. I hope you can use this information effectively.
Man, that would have been great. That was when I was hoping to go from Dallas and Tulsa up through Seattle in 2018. I didn't get to do all that, but anyway, I basically went over to LA to start out the 2018 Gun Show Loophole Tour and to test the van out, if I remember correctly, right? I had just gotten the new van and I wanted to take it on a trip to kind of get going for the tour. Or no, I already had the van for a while. So what the hell did it was? I just went to LA, I guess, just to get over to LA. I forget what the hell I went to LA for. That wasn't the year that I got the robot, is it? I just barely got the robot last year. So I went to LA and drove around. I think I was in LA and I was asking Angelina where to park to get a picture of the city good in the morning, like a good sunrise view of the city. And she told me where to go. And when I was there, I figured, and she said that's right north of the LA riots. And then I figured out that I was there, I think, right after the riots had happened. So I just missed the anniversary, I think, or else I was there right before the anniversary. So anyway, that gave me something to do that day. And I drove around and checked out all those different scenes from the famous, or the infamous, I don't know what to call it, the pictures that I guess were pretty much used in the aftermath, like in, when the riots were happening, and it was very much like the bird flu, or I mean, what the hell is this one? The bat flu craziness at the beginning of April, when everybody started going crazy with the coverage of the bat flu. It was a lot like the LA riots, right? Back in 90. It was constant attention. Every single media source was focused on those riots. And then I guess it started with sort of just a lot of attention on Rodney King, right? And then the riots started, and then it was just 24/7 coverage of the riots. So then, after the riots, which lasted for a while, when they would talk about the riots, there was probably about 8 pictures, right, that they would use. The one with the Koreans on the roof and the Winchell's Donuts that was on fire, that one mall. So there was like these set of pictures that for whatever reason, they were cheap or weren't expensive or something, and everybody used them. And those are the places that I went to check out, like those pictures that were used as representations of the riot. I wanted to go check out those places and see what the deal was. And if I remember correctly, everything was rebuilt except for the one donut shop. Wasn't a donut shop anymore. It was like I don't remember. It was like a payday loan or a burrito shop or something else. It was just not a donut shop anymore. Was that the first big event that got 24/7 coverage in '92? No way. What was the first big event that got coverage?
The wall coming down.
No, I guess yes. I mean, the wall coming down got coverage, and when was that? 86 or
86?
something. But I was gonna say, I remember Tylenol getting a lot of coverage. Let's just ask the internet. What was the first national news story? I think it's gonna be.
The wall coming down, the first 24-hour coverage, because that's right when I think like CNN started and doing 24-hour news. And because back then in 86, the news didn't go 24 hours a day. They wouldn't all of a sudden come on at 2 in the morning. You had to wait till 6 a.m. to get your news, right?
It won't say. Stupid internet's too stupid to tell me. What was the? Oh, I didn't write it. What was the? I don't know why I wrote ST big national. What was the biggest national news story ever? Or no, what was the first? That's what I was trying to do, and my one doesn't work. What was the first national news story? Maybe if I spell it with actual words, it'll figure it out. Oh, here's old man. Yeah, what? The riots? I think 92 was the same of the riots. They were in Los Angeles, if I remember correctly. I remember they were in Los Angeles, and that's in California. Desert Storm. Desert Storm was way after all that, though, right?
What, 92, right?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm thinking the 2001. So yeah, Desert Storm. I don't remember. I was too young. No, I don't know. I do remember the riots affecting me, and that had to be around the same time, right? But oh, you mean like when Desert Storm, when like we actually sent people over there or whatever, like when the first
That first night,
rioters
right?
or stuff? Yeah, I guess that's true. But was that first? Which was first in USA? How can you find out what to search for?
January 16th, 1991, right?
First national news story. I'm going to put it that way instead of asking what was.
Or
I'm going to put in Wikipedia first.
I guess August 2nd, 1990 to February 1991. That's what the Gulf War. That's what it says for the Gulf War. So August 2nd, 1990.
Well, but that would, I mean, national news would have been like the wall coming down, or the Sputnik, or the any of the space things. The Stanley Cup riots. Nobody cares about that in our country, Bob. We don't even know what the Stanley Cup is. Oh wait, Stanley Cup, is that the hockey one? I was thinking of the soccer one. The first ever regularly scheduled, well, that's the first news was in 1940 with a simulcast. The first serious attempt at a dedicated television news by CBS in 41. Pearl Harbor was in 1941, so I guess Pearl Harbor could have been the first news. But is that the question, or was like what was the first news recently or something?
24-hour it covered. Like, what was the
Oh,
first
okay,
story?
the first
24 hours.
24-hour coverage. Because I was going to say because there was also riots in the 60s in LA, right? The first national news story, 24-hour news cycle.
I remember Desert Storm, I think, being on like throughout the whole night, right? Them
I guess
showing
that'd
all
be
these
the
missiles and
question.
rockets going in and shooting down Scud missiles, and like that was covered like all night long, like on CNN.
The question would be when did it start? Like when did the 24-hour news cycle start?
Well, like I just remember CNN. It was that Gulf War was on 24/7. CNN was getting like pictures of like stealth bombers doing stuff and bombing, lasing targets and bombing them, and just all the missiles, and that was like that lasted for days. That's 24-hour coverage. That's all they talked about.
It would probably be like whenever CNN started, right? Yeah, they're saying 1980 when CNN started with 24-hour
Yeah.
cable news, followed by headline news in 1982. And I guess the success of those would have then turned into, what do you call them? Like the what do you call like the news stuff, the talking head crap that's on in the evenings now, like the entertainment news or whatever. Because I would have, when back in the olden days, news was journalists and they went to school and it was all black and white and they wore ties and stuff, and they'd get kicked out if they weren't doing it right. You ever seen the show
I
about the history of the National Enquirer?
I haven't.
You ever dumped a whole giant thing of water on yourself while you're trying to smash the fucking moth? My dog looks at me like I did it to her. She didn't even get hit. She's way on the other side of the room, and she acted like I just did this to get her. There was water everywhere, including on me. Dang it! And the moth is getting away scot free. You ever seen the documentary about the National Enquirer, where it comes from?
I have not.
It's pretty good. I think it's fairly new. I got my electric tennis racket, so I'm going to get the
National Geographic.
National Geographic
or National Enquirer.
National Enquirer. What do you call like the?
That's the one with all the crazy stories, right? Like the Bat Boy and all that, right?
Yeah. What do you call it? Like a tabloid? The tabloid.
Yeah.
Thing?
Yeah. I'm racking my brain of anything that happened before 86 and 80, between that period, and the first big event is the wall coming down, because I remember coverage of that all night long, playing of them, and all day of them tearing down that wall and kind of like, celebrating and people crossing the line, and that was a huge thing. I mean, that was huge worldwide. Like, that's the biggest thing I can think of after 1980 is the wall. I'm pretty sure that was in 86.
So this like I say, there's some sort of documentary about it. It probably talks about it in here. It's pretty interesting because basically it was a legit paper. It was just like a New York daily paper or something, I think, and documentary. So 2014, there was a documentary called Inquiring Minds. It's interesting because I never paid any attention to this thing before, except that I knew that my grandma read it or whatever. Because like you say, it was like what Oprah did, or aliens land on a cruise ship and do stuff to it or something. So it was a regular newspaper, and then some guy who his dad ran a paper in Italy that had done okay, I guess, because he had enough money to buy it, and then somehow had something to do with the mafia or something. He comes along and he buys the thing as like just like it was just a normal daily newspaper. It wasn't weird or anything, and then he ends up turning it into what it was, and then there was more to it than just being a weird newspaper. Anyway, they'd done a couple of things, but I was curious as to when that happened, and it looks like it was in 1950 that it was purchased by this guy, the son of this guy. So it was probably in 53. Selling magazine at Cirque Market checkouts was in 1967. I just wanted to see if that had anything to do with where 24-hour news cycle came from. Because I think whenever one of the things that Inquirer did, or what he did, was figure out to put it at the supermarket checkout. And I guess prior to 1967, that wasn't a thing. Like, there wouldn't have been a whole bunch of those things at the checkout. So obviously somewhere between 67 and now, that became the biggest thing ever, to cram the thing, the supermarket checkouts full of these magazines for women. So that has to do something with the way information gets disseminated, right? Because that's a lot of people read those things.
A lot of people read them just standing in line at the supermarket. Like, done without even buying them. A lot of people read them.
Well, that's a good point. Actually, yeah, just the headlines on them can have some influence. If they all just got together and did headlines on something, that could potentially change an election. Dang, all right, I got to get up.
When they're saying Bill Clinton met with aliens, and you know what I mean, like that was on the covers of all those. They'd have a picture of Bill Clinton shaking an alien's hand and all sorts of stuff like that. So,
all right, so HVS is wearing a tie right now. He gets all mad when I said people don't wear ties. 86 was the wall. The Challenger was 86. That was on regular television. There was no cable yet when that. If there was cable, there was no news on cable yet.
yeah, no, it was just HBO and Cinemax.
We watched regular TV for the Challenger, so that means we would have watched regular TV for the wall also, right?
Oh, no, or CNN. No, the CNN was on.
CNN started in 80. So yeah, the wall would have been happened during, well, both actually. Well, the thing is, just because CNN existed, CNN was out of Atlanta or something, right? Like, unless you had, I guess most people had the Superstation out of Atlanta, though. So maybe we did watch the wall or the Challenger on CNN.
We all watched that. All of us that were in school, the schools made a really big thing about that. So all the kids across the entire country were watching that. At least if you were in elementary or junior high, you were, because there was a teacher on that flight. So the school system, the public education system, made it a big deal to promote this to the kids in all the classrooms, since there was a teacher on it. So we all watched that live in classrooms.
Yeah.
All over the whole country. That happened. I remember like them talking about bringing counselors in and all sorts of stuff, and because they were real worried about how that was going to mess with the kids.
I'm like walking through a whole bunch like river of water here. It's all gross. Then we got that's from the History Channel article about CNN. What is it? Oh, the network gained significant traction with its live coverage of the Persian Gulf War in 91. Audience grew with increasing popularity. That's probably where it started. I'm going to say that's probably, because I can remember that happened and it was sort of more than what your local news could get a hold of, right? It was bigger news that your local stuff was just too far down the chain. Like your local stuff would get it, after it was syndicated over, where CNN was just part of the syndication feed, and we were just figuring that out, that we didn't have to wait for it to get disseminated or whatever.
The Oakland earthquake. What year was that? That was like on during a World Series, right? So that got like extra attention.
The earthquake that knocked down the highways and stuff.
Yep, that was in the '80s, right? 'Cause that was during the A's and somebody. It was in Oakland. I remember the Oakland A's playing, and I remember watching that the World Series.
I don't
That
remember that at all. So that had to be when I was doing something else. Because I can't. I mean, I know it happened, but I do not remember watching it on TV. That had to happen in some sort of years that I wasn't watching TV.
sometime in the late '80s.
Olympics or something. If we had an Olympics here at a time when cable was kitchen in or something, that could have been the kind of thing that would get everybody watching TV back in the day. Or, I mean, get everybody watching the 24-hour news cycle. But I don't remember what years the Olympics are. All right, well, that's close enough. I'm not walking in a puddle of water anymore.
It's every 2 years now, right? 2 years winters, and the next 2 years later summer, then 2 years later after that winter. So every 4 years for winter, every 4 years for summer.
Something like that. But they're screwing it up now because of the, or somebody got them sick. So we got to change the Olympic tradition. All right, I'm quit being distracted by a bunch of water on the floor, and then get back to clicking on stuff. Watched an interesting thing that made me think VHS. I guess he's talking about HVS. What's he's out there? Falkland Islands War. Yeah.
It was a super common thing in the '80s if you were going to go somewhere, 'cause, nothing was on demand, right? So you'd pop in VHS tapes and hit record, and then like just for the news and just for like, TV shows, right? That were just on regular TV. Because there was no on demand, you would have to wait for a rerun to see it again.
Kind of depends. I don't know. I mean, yes, it was technically possible, but now that I'm thinking about it, some people use their VCRs like that. And at the end of VCRs, more people did, but it took a while. Like when VCRs first came out, I only was thinking about this because I was watching that Netflix documentary that's on right now. I don't know, maybe it's on Netflix, but there's a documentary on Netflix about Netflix right now. The story of Netflix. Huh?
I just thought the Netflix documentary about Netflix. I was saying that.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. I thought I was going to see the whole thing, but I didn't. I'm somewhere in the middle of it. I must have paused it or something. It's because I started watching it earlier this evening, but I'm not done with it. I'm only like halfway through. But at some point of it, when they're talking about when they were competing with Blockbuster and stuff, they showed a bunch of VCRs, and it made me because they talked about how Blockbuster got going, and that made me think about. There was a time there that nobody thinks about anymore, and you maybe got to be old enough to remember it. But there was a time there when VCRs were brand new, where Blockbuster and stuff didn't happen yet. But it was actually a long time. It was the whole time I was in school, I think. Like VCRs existed. And then by the time I was in high school, you could rent VCR tapes. And there was no DVDs by the time I was in high school. Like DVDs didn't happen yet, even, I don't think. Or no, they definitely didn't happen. We barely had CDs, what am I saying? So by the time I was in high school, you could barely go to a store and rent a DVD that was like a chain, but barely a chain. And for the long time there, you either just didn't even have a VCR or you rented a VCR with the movies. And that's the part that talked about in Blockbuster show, this part of the Blockbuster part of this documentary, and I had forgotten about. But there was a chunk of time there for many years actually where even though people knew what a VCR was, nobody was recording tapes yet. Is all I guess I'm saying. It wasn't until for me, like I was getting out of high school, that like a regular person would buy a blank VHS and put it in there, and like you're saying, record the news or record something and then watch it later. And then that definitely became a thing for a while there. Like that was the thing. It's like, oh, I'm just going to record my shows. And then you'd have like this big stack of blank tapes that you couldn't use because they had a bunch of like Mama's Family or something on them for somebody.
Yeah, I remember. I remember. Well, I remember my uncle who was really into like just the big top of the line stereos back then, the top of the line VCRs and stuff. I remember him having beta tapes and doing that, recording stuff on beta tapes. His Johnny Carson every night, like reruns of Star Trek, like before you could just go buy like a box set, right? And so recording all the Star Trek episodes of the original series, like Johnny Carson every night, David Letterman, stuff like that, while he was at work, and then going from beta to VHS to like laser disc to to
Well,
like
like half of my family didn't even watch TV. Like my one grandma, she'd watch Lawrence Welk on Sunday, and I don't think she watched it. I mean, if there was a TV on, she didn't leave the room or something. She wasn't against it. She just didn't care about watching TV. So I don't remember her ever just sitting there watching TV. And then my grandpa never watched TV, so they barely even had TVs. And that was my whole their whole lives. Like they just didn't watch TV that much. But so they never recorded nothing. I don't even think they even owned a VCR. Honestly, they barely had a TV. There's no way they owned a VCR. Now that I'm thinking about it. And then my other grandma, she got to where like you're talking about, where, like I say, she would she was like Matt. She was constantly watching TV shows, and she would want to watch more shows than she could watch. So she eventually got to where she was recording shows, so she could watch a show at the same time and then watch the recorded one later, kind of thing. So she definitely got into it. But I would say I didn't know that many people that. I guess it was just my age or whatever. I just didn't know that many people that were recording VCRs on a regular basis that much. I remember we would record like a movie off of HBO or something, just so that we didn't have to watch it right when the HBO started.
I remember recording songs off the radio on cassette tapes to listen to.
Yeah, we started this whole thing not just on talking about old people shit, but on talking about where the news 24-hour news cycle came from, and where how those riots were, as far as like if that was our first time watching it. Now, as far as riots and stuff, the '68 riots happened. So HVS, how old? No kidding around. Do you remember those '68 riots at all?
The 68 riots? No, I would have been 4 years old.
Okay, so you're not that old. So you're like me. I mean, we heard
No,
of
I'm not at all like you, G-Webs, but go ahead.
as far as age-wise or whatever. Like they didn't really bring it up a lot. We probably might have heard about it like in a high school level class or college level class, but it wasn't something that came up. I mean, maybe you lived there. Maybe it came up more often because when you lived there, but it wasn't. I mean, it was like sort of like the Berkeley things or something like that. It was just a thing you knew about as far as history. But I'm assuming that all was as much as close to 24-hour news coverage as anything else that would have happened.
When I was 4 years old, or maybe 5, I remember watching the nightly news coverage of the Vietnam War, looking to try and find my uncle in the news coverage, and I never saw him.
Yeah, I know that was a thing, right? And I was too young for that. I don't remember any of that stuff because it ended before I could remember anything. But that was a thing, right? Like during the war, people would they'd offer information, so you'd kind of watch the news show, like you're saying, to get actual input or info.
Yeah, and I also remember that my uncle sent me from Vietnam. He sent me seashells, a bunch of seashells from Vietnam, and I remember picking him up at the airport when he came back and taking him out to dinner with the folks. And he sure had a lot of medals on his chest. I mean, he only worked in S2. He wasn't, a LERP or anything like that. But he did 2 tours, and it did mess him up. He never, for years, whenever he went to a restaurant, he would always like sit in near the back of the room in a spot where he could see both entrances and exits.
All right. So now you're talking about your uncle, but we're talking about originally the riot that's coming up, and the anniversary of it is tomorrow.
Which riot are we talking about?
The LA riot is tomorrow.
I remember the LA riot.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. I remember it very much. So I would say, for me at least, that was the first time something happened on a national level that got a bunch of attention. That was a question mark. That was a big unknown. And my first experience being alone, like being an adult, with that happening, and I don't know what you call it. Like I say, the question mark, or like the spin or the play, was that, the world's going to hell. Like, the world's ending. This is the end. We're recording it. We're showing it. We're bringing it to you right here. Here's the end.
It looked like that on TV, but I mean, I was in LA, and I never saw anybody riot.
Well, I know, but you know what I'm saying? Like, if you turned on any television, it was that, and it was either 100% like live of, like from the helicopters watching stuff burn, or like play by play of like, here's a bunch of people just gathered in this basketball court. Oh, they just pulled over a car. Oh, they just smashed it. It's burning. Now they're burning down a house.
My folks got a call from our family in Israel asking, like, if we need to get out of LA and come to Israel or something.
Yeah,
it was pretty laughed. It was like nobody was rioting. I mean, I was living in Topanga Canyon. When I heard there was a riot, I pulled out my cold government 45, chambered around, but nobody was rioting in Topanga Canyon. I was building my studio in Burbank at the time. Nobody was rioting in Burbank. The studio that I bought my mixing board from, they were rioting outside that place. But and the guy had just bought. I bought the mixing board, and then somebody came along and bought the studio. It's called Music Box, but I don't know if it's still there, but it was in Hollywood, and there were riots in Hollywood and some of the badder sections of town. But I mean, I lived there, and I never saw anybody riot or get hostile, and other than putting a mag and chambering around in my 45, cold government, that was the extent of the riot. Nothing happened, as far as I could tell.
A map here, basically, trying to remember where all this stuff is. So if you go into this little dense area, is all the high-rise downtown stuff, and then let's see, this little ridge of nothing is where the mountains are, and you can see it says Hollywood sign, so you get some perspective here. And then if you go over to here somewhere, this is where Terminator comes in. So that's like a little triangle I always think of. So if you look at LA, like that little triangle is LA. Everything else is suburbs, they call them. This is pretty much where it all happened in this little section right here. This, where these roads go from whatever, like an angle going straight. That's pretty much where Koreatown is, right? Somewhere around in here. And then that's
out of Koreatown. I mean, there was a Reginald Denny attack. That was a big thing because it was racially motivated.
So yeah, that was where the thing started at Florence and whatever down here. So this is about the extent of it, is these couple of blocks here, but it was billions. It was like $2 billion worth of damage or something. They literally burned a chunk of it down. So yeah, it wasn't anywhere near all of LA. When you start zooming out, again, it's this like section here. We can see on my mouse.
LA's a big city, man. I mean, the whole, county is huge.
But the thing is, it was the way that the coverage and everything, the police had kind of created a perimeter, and they literally just sat here in the
perimeter was their police station and the donut shop. They decided
literally sitting here with like, roadblocks and shit around, and then if you look at it like this, they would show helicopters and they'd be like, oh, the police are over here, and then here's where this house is burning, and it would just be here's another house burning.
If there was a problem where somebody was rioting, the police didn't want to upset anybody by showing up. That was it. Daryl Gates basically didn't want to show up because there would be problems if the police showed up and tried to enforce the law. I mean, it was just insane what the police policy was basically not to do anything. But
Whatever. 2020 hindsight. What we're talking about.
It's not 2020 hindsight. It was blatant, politically correct stupidity.
Mm-hmm. So again, whatever.
Well, I was there and you weren't, but where I was, nobody was rioting. So
yeah. So again, we're not here to. What you're going to tell the world that history's wrong?
No, just you.
Right?
I don't think the world listens to this show, but it's okay. I think the point to learn is that you can't. If you have to consider where you get your news, and it's just not real. I mean, it's not. I'm not going to use the word fake news, but it's just you're getting a false you're getting a false image of what's actually happening if you just look at the news on television.
All I remember is just what I saw on the news because that was so long ago in the early 90s. And I maybe had like 4 or 5 channels, right? Like that had news on it. And when I'd flip to any of those 5 channels, I mean, it was showing just, stuff burning and cars being destroyed and business.
No, it was so funny because I lived in LA. I was born in LA, and I was driving to work every day in LA, and nobody. I never saw one of those things happen. I never even saw anybody argue about anything. I mean, but I didn't have time to watch TV, so I kept hearing it's like somebody invades your country and you don't know because they invaded somewhere else or something. It's like a non-event to your typical person in Los Angeles. It really was nothing.
Okay, so that's your perception of it. It started on the 29th and it went through the 4th. So I don't remember what days of the week that was, but that's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, almost a week. And like that horse is saying, it was every time you turn on the TV, that was it. And like I say, it was interesting for me because it was not something that I think about very often or thought about very often, but I happened to be in LA and I had the time to check it out. Like I say, at a time that was, not too far off from the actual dates of the anniversary of it happening, as far as time of the year or whatever. And then, like I say, driving down, kind of showed you on the map there and on the video, checking out the different iconic or whatever pictures from back in the day that they used to represent the event. And they're all about 4 blocks. Like HBS is saying, it's just a little portion. I don't know the neighborhoods, but that neighborhood or whatever, it's where the University of California is. And
which one?
I don't know, whichever one Angelina went to. And then it's south of the city, and it's just a couple of blocks. It's just it's a highly densely populated area, so it affected a lot of people. And there's lots of things you can look at it in hindsight, but I think one is to look at it one way to look at it is that, well, for those of us that remember the coverage of it, is to then look at it with hindsight to look at how it healed and how, there's scars from it, but they're healed. There's memorials.
If you're Reginald Denny, you had scars, but for regular people, I mean, it was a non-event. It was nothing. I mean, truly, your perception is from the media. The media's wrong.
Yeah. So you can go ahead and say that if it doesn't affect you personally, then it didn't happen. But in real life, a lot of people were manipulated by it, and it's still a blip on a radar. You can choose to ignore anything you want, but I don't ignore stuff. I like to look back at history and learn from it if we can, so that we can move on from it. I don't find any satisfaction in laughing at people or feeling like I'm better than them because I can deal with something better than them. I'd like to attempt to use whatever I've got ability to communicate and have conversations, and people that I communicate with look at ways that we can learn from this kind of stuff and not
like the fact that minority gun owners protected their businesses and they didn't get burned and looted, right?
right.
Like, I mean, that's That's one of the big things, as being a gun owner and 2A advocate, that I come across, right? And that's always pointed to, back in time again. But I think it's good to point to that, because it is the truth. Like, those guys turned away a mob, and they didn't get burned and looted. They
What I
didn't lose their
remember,
livelihood.
what I remember was a story after the riots from when I was working in Burbank. I went once in a while. I went to a local bar, pub, and had a drink. And the bartender told me what happened during the LA riots at his bar, because he was kind of an anti-gun kind of a guy. So he said, he thought he saw somebody uh, carrying a gun in the bar. So he said, okay, everybody with a gun, take it out and put it on the bar. So everybody in the bar had a gun. It turns out, and they all went up to the bar and put their guns on the bar. And the governor was like, okay, I was just checking. So that was pretty funny, I thought. May not have been legal to carry a gun, but everybody was carrying a gun.
When you're talking about
At least it may have been a violation of the county law.
when you're talking
or the
about
city
how
law.
how effective it was for
Something weird just happened to the show. I see a big
Is my audio not working?
play thing in the middle here. Let's see.
My audio not working?
I can hear you.
Was it working before?
Something weird happened. It's like a play button appeared in the middle of StreamYard, and then I had to click it, and now everything's working. I think.
All right, so you can hear me now?
I can hear you.
Right.
Yes.
So you were talking about how effective it was for the property owners and that to stand on their ropes and that. And I think one of the other things HVS kept bringing up, isn't Denny the guy that got pulled out of his truck and wailed on by the riot? And if that's the guy we're talking about, that definitely happened, and that definitely happened like in front of a bunch of cameras. It was happening in front of a bunch of cameras, and it was somebody that saw it happening live who went out there and stopped it and picked him up and took him to the hospital.
Reginald Denny.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to say anything is a pass. I'm just saying don't fucking penalize every single human being in LA for what happened during a riot, because the same kind of shit that was being evil was, and it was an opportunity for good to happen too. So there was good stuff that happened there. And if you don't allow people to heal, then nothing will fucking heal.
Well, the police made lots of mistakes, but
everybody made lots of mistakes. And again, if you want to pigeonhole and say that it was one person and somehow that compartmentalizes it for you and you can wash your hands of it, then feel free to do that. But I think that there's more effective ways to learn from things and not just assume that it was somebody else's fault.
Well, how many people do you think went out and got concealed carry permits, or bought a firearm after they saw what happened to that truck driver, right? And it was like
California. I mean, honestly, it would be an interesting thing to look at.
the whole country, because that was, I bet the whole country. I bet the next day after that, I bet you a ton of people went out and bought guns and went and got concealed.
what I was trying to say when the audio cut out was that a local bar in Burbank, by where my studio was, the bartender told me what happened during the riots at his bar, because he wasn't like a gun guy at all. So he thought he saw somebody carrying a gun in the bar, that he was a bartender. And so he said, okay, everybody that has a gun, I need you to put it on the bar right now. So it turned out that everybody that was in the bar had a gun. So like a couple dozen people went and all put their guns on the bar. And so the bartender was like, okay, I was just checking, never mind. So it doesn't matter if there's a citywide riot. It's not going to matter if anybody has a fucking permit. Everybody's going to strap up. I mean, at least anybody with any common sense would, if they're going to go outside of their house. That's one thing I never get about my dad. He doesn't even want to own a holster. I mean, he's a better shot than me, but he's not as trigger happy. But he just the idea of wearing a holster as a civilian is just, I don't know.
All right. So I went over and grabbed my list of some stuff here. I got some hard copies before everything died. So we're talking the consequence to the country or whatever after 92. We have a list of the states that went concealed carry. Started in 1980 in Indiana, then Maine in 85, North Dakota in 85, and South Dakota in 86. Florida went from may issue to shall issue in 87, and that became the beginning of everything. Then they got Georgia, 89, Oregon, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Tennessee, all in 89. Idaho, Mississippi, all went from may issue to shall issue in 1990. And then you get Montana in 91. So that's a bunch of states that kind of is pre-positioned, and that's the influence of Joyce Malcolm, I believe, and what's her face that just had her, Marion, the lady from the first NRA president, Marion, can I think of her name? The lady that just had her birthday the other day. I believe it's their instigation with Florida in 87 that got those other states to all kick in. Then we have Los Angeles riots in 92. Then you get Arizona flipping to begin issuing CCW in 94, and Alaska in 94, Colorado in 94, Arkansas, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Nevada, Utah, Virginia in 95, Kentucky, Louisiana, South Carolina in 96. So did this was in the middle. It wasn't like the instigator, but I agree with you, Dead Horse. I think this probably got a lot of people thinking about it. And like everything HVS just said there, when there's laws or whatever, everybody, when there's nothing's going on, everybody's like, yeah, sure, law's great, whatever. Whenever something goes to shit, everybody looks around and goes, what's real and what's, makes everybody feel good.
I never got a good explanation why the Second Amendment by itself isn't our carry permit, but from anybody since I've been alive. But there it goes again. It just turned off.
Nobody's saying anything. We got constitutional carry doesn't really start up until 2010, so I don't think that had anything to do with it. But we're looking at it as gun owners, but there's probably lots of other ways to look at it. When you look at what caused it all, the tension and the communication, this all happened in 92, so pre-internet, pre-ability for people to learn from, like what all the stuff we learn from the internet or get from the internet, being able to learn and organize and share. So I'm guessing, it's just a different, there's probably a reason we haven't seen riots like this happen very often, if at all, since. And again, it has to do something with everybody having a selfish self-interest in it not happening again. What was this? Is this like a Google search or is this something else?
Yeah, just Google search on the LA riots. Just looking at pictures of, just because it's the internet now, so a ton of these pictures you can see that you wouldn't have been able to see back then, right?
And you wouldn't be able to pick one. You can zoom in on them and get some stuff from them. Now, I thought it was interesting because I think it was the same trip that last in whatever it was, 98 or 2018 when I went to LA to take the tour of that area. I went to the LA Police Museum also, and there's not one mention of the riots.
It was pretty big for the National Guard to get deployed too, right? Like they just don't deploy that.
Well, like HUS was saying, there was no. I mean, the reason this whole thing started was the police, and the police is, what do you call it? Like lack of respect for whatever you call it, like the people of LA, right? So this whole thing started with police being just dicks, I guess, and doing things poorly, and then of course when it boiled up, came to a head, they weren't prepped for any of this, even though it's LA, and I think most people agree that a police force in LA should be ready for something like crazy, especially in a city that's already had a history of something like a riot happening.
There's a before and after.
Look at that white van. Look at that white van.
Yeah.
You were there.
That was a shorter one.
Well, they don't show pictures of where nothing happened. I mean, they're showing pictures of where all this stuff happened, but
Well, I mean, you could kind of say nothing happened here because they were just, it's preventing it. Those weren't all pictures from there. Those black and white pictures look way older than that.
Look at the cars. That's
That one was, yeah, that one is. That other one just seemed like the fashion and shit just seemed really old.
if you have any gas station pictures, I'd like to see the price of gas back then.
That's the thing. There wasn't a heck of a lot of gas stations in that area. It's LA, so it's mostly residential, honestly. And then a little bit of Koreatown there had maybe like the store where the Winchells, or not the Winchells, the fast food restaurant. There's like some stores there. Otherwise, it was all residential. And then you go down and kind of take a left, and that's where the Winchells is, and that was all stores. Now that kind of stuff, I don't know what's going on there because that's the stuff that, I don't know. I guess they didn't have.
I think little spats of violence broke out all over. You know what I mean?
For sure. But I'm saying they didn't have that so much from the coverage at the time. You mostly saw stuff from the air, right? Like helicopter type of.
Well, there
Yeah, because these are just all private photographer pictures of them actually developing film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, somebody had the thing, but nobody was working for the TV in 92. There was no place to put
Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah, we still had wet film back then. It wasn't all digital cameras.
Yeah, somebody might have gone out and recorded it on a VHS or something. Well, where were they going to put it? Oh,
I got a question for you.
They would have turned
if this was to happen today, would it be worse because of social media, or would it be not as bad because of social media?
I think it has
social media like qualm it, or would it like
I think the answer is not as bad because we've seen Ferguson, and that didn't just erupt into anything near as bad, and the fact that other ones haven't happened is another why I say it. I think there's less and less a chance going forward that these things can happen because they can only happen through ignorance and anger and lack of understanding. Internet provides, solutions to all three of those.
Well, that's assuming it depends on how bad things get in the world or in your particular neck of the woods.
All you got to do is show me where there's riots that have happened that are the size or bigger than LA since 1992.
France.
I did not know Rodney King passed away. I had no clue.
The whole thing with the Yellow Jackets in France was a pretty big riot. In Venezuela, they're pretty much rioting now.
All right, well, you pick two instances of singularities in time in two different countries that aren't even, well, one of them's in our hemisphere, but the other one's on the other side of oceans from us, and the other one is on the southern hemisphere from us.
Well, France isn't like the far side of the moon. I mean, they were there to help us at Yorktown, as I recall. But
Yorktown.
What do you think? That wasn't important?
No, it's just hardly relevant when you're suggesting that Edward said, is there going to be more or less amplification of something like this since the internet? And I said there can't be, and you just said because of Yorktown and France there could be.
What you said was, where have there been riots recently? And I said there's riots now in Venezuela and recently in France for the Yellow Jackets. And I can tell you this about revolutions. A riot is one thing. A revolution is another. For there to be a successful revolution, the people rioting or revolting, they have to be willing to kill not just the people that they don't like, but they have to be willing to kill innocent passersby in the process and not care. And that hasn't been like that. Because nobody will take them seriously. I mean, and that it's just an observation of how revolutions work.
Okay, so that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So as far as Dead Horse, when you're talking about like when it happened,
Nothing to do with what you're talking about, but whatever.
I don't. What do you think? Do you think that the internet will amplify something like this, or vulture?
I like to have hope, so I want to hope that the internet will calm it, because I want to hope that with everyone having just cell phones nowadays and being able to take pictures and video, and that'll keep people on the good side, just that threat alone. And then the threat of being I guess publicly called out or shamed or caught, and stuff like that on social media. And
Heard of flashpoint?
you know I think that information so much more at our fingertips nowadays. I hope at least that side of it, if nothing else, helps calm it and make it not so bad. So
Well,
I don't know.
if you look at Venezuela, I mean, people don't have food, they don't have electricity, they don't have medical care, they got nothing. They got nothing to lose by rioting. So it just depends where you are.
Do they have the same internet infrastructure and social media infrastructure that we do, though? And
Yeah, they have cell phones. They have cell phones.
I would think they might not have something exactly like what we got, but I think that's an answer. Like cell phones, and knowing that you can network, like having sites like a Facebook or something where you could, if you can get access, you could get together. That they have.
If the people that are starving and rioting and all that, I'm just wondering is, I can see okay, so let's take back in the late '80s or whatever. If you wanted an old AT&T brick phone, you were rich to have a cell phone, right?
Right.
So I'm thinking even just the basic cell phones down there to have Facebook or Instagram on and internet and stuff, right? I'm guessing, I could totally be wrong, but I'm guessing you probably have to be pretty well off to have that down there if they can't even afford food, right?
Oh, no, I agree with you 100%. And it might not even infrastructure might not even be there. They might have to go to a library or a school and use an internet connection on a computer, but I'm saying they just don't have nothing. But I agree with you. They don't have it handily or readily available or inexpensive.
And the way we are now with I guess Obama phones and everything like that, everyone has.
I don't know how you can say that, guys, because I did a live stream of a riot in Venezuela on the Lock and Load show once. and it was you should go back and look at it. I mean, you could tell the people were so skinny. You could tell they were suffering from malnutrition, and you could see why they were rioting. They had nothing, and you could see the police lines. You could see the people rioting, and you tell me they don't have the internet? No, there's ways to do things with just cell phones, and to get them on the internet somehow. However they do it, by hook or by crook. And you can't tell me that they don't have the ability to communicate and organize a riot. I mean, you don't have to organize if everybody in the entire country.
I think you're missing the whole point here. No one said anything about I'm telling you that they can't. What I'm saying is that the average poor person down there, maybe even the average middle class, probably don't have access to a cell phone right now, can't afford to pay an internet bill. They don't have, I'm guessing it's only the, upper middle class and upper class that have that down there.
There's no upper class in Venezuela. There's the killers in charge, the usurpers of power, and everybody else.
Right.
You're applying American standards
earlier, but
you're applying American ideals of class structure to a country that doesn't have them or anything else.
And you're adding level of detail that isn't necessary here.
Over 1,000 fires. I had no idea it was that many fires.
And the whole thing was 25 people died, which isn't none, but it isn't considering the amount of damage and the size of the area covered.
Well, 572 injured too. That could be life-changing injuries. That's
a good thing. Exactly. But it's nothing compared to the corona.
Well, I don't know. But that all happened in what, like 6 days, right? So I don't know. That's, like 6 days. I think that's a lot of, that's a lot of fires in 6 days. 1,000 fires, man. Right? That's it.
Speaking of somebody who had their house burned down in Malibu, or the apartment I was living in, and everything. I mean, the Malibu fire was in '92 was a lot more destructive than anything during the just property wise, because we had like Santa Ana winds blowing, cruising through at 65 miles an hour, and the flame was like a flamethrower going through up and down the hills until it hit the ocean. And the ocean, when it got to the ocean, there wasn't anything left to burn.
There's been a couple of things I think that were interviews with store owners that I've seen over the years. People have come back and talked to them about like the firearms even. Maybe it was that. And then I tried to find something about the gun shops, but there was only like one gun shop in the area. Oh, what's this? Oh, that is, I think, a whole museum just for the riots.
Yeah.
Riot museum?
Yeah, because that's way bigger. That's different than the LA Police Museum. That says it's the California African American Museum. I wonder if that's that original first cop car.
I wonder how many taxpayer dollars were spent on this.
Yeah, but when we talk about prepping and stuff, that's a whole different way of prepping compared to what a lot of people think of. And when you got something like the weird slow quarantine type of thing that happened this time around with the bat flu, that's a third type of prepping. So hopefully we'll see some evolution of people's prepping palette, or like awareness, or like what they're prepping for will be.
Well, I don't know if there's any more than just general prepping. I mean, there's a lot of different situations you can prepare for. What I always liked about prepping was if you get bored with one aspect of it, you could move on to something else. I mean, okay, you completely exhausted. You own every kind of gun. You have 10 million rounds of ammo. Okay, so what are you going to do if X, or and play out different scenarios. And it's by and large a way to keep your brain working. It's interesting because we could prepare for a pandemic, or you could be unprepared for a pandemic, or a food supply chain interruption. Are you prepared for that? I'm sure everybody has experienced the great toilet paper panic of 2020. It's just, there's an endless way. It's what I find interesting about prepping, and for me, it's always been just a hobby.
All right, we didn't ask you about it like a hobby. I said that I'm interested to see how people are going to change, and you just said there's nothing to change. Dead horse, you think people are going to change their scope? I guess maybe that's the word I'm looking for. Like what they prep for
after something like this.
Yeah, or how?
Look at the picture I'm showing right there. I think that's like a perfect example of like two opposite gang members tying their little gang bandana things together, right, in the middle of these riots, and like that's a powerful thing right there. So of course I think it's going to change, and I think it did change, and I think like this is a powerful thing that happened, and I think it probably changes people to this day. People who talk about it in conversations and listen to conversations like we're having right now.
Well, can you imagine the people that were there and even involved in it, right? Like lived in the area, willing to rock, lit something on fire, encourage somebody to go do something or whatever, and then thinking like whatever, when I'm sure any individual, just like the whole one drop, doesn't think it's responsible for the flood thing. Somebody's probably out there going, oh yeah, oh shit. And then at the end of it all, it's like, holy moly, look what we did to ourselves, to our own community or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's gotta have a consequence. And that's probably another reason we didn't see anything like this.
So red and blue, for people who don't know, is the Crips and the Bloods.
No, everything else. There's 9. What do you think you're talking
They're rival gangs, rival drug dealers, fight over territory, fight over everything. And I think there might have been a lot of looting of stores.
But as soon as stuff started burning down, it's like, well, we could watch it burn down or we could grab all that stuff out of there. I mean, there's looting and then there's like just being practical about, again, like something's about to burn down, you're going to go grab it out of there.
So if you could say that this was a race riot and largely it was black people destroying their own neighborhoods, but all I can tell you is I can never know what it's like to be a black man living in America. I just can't.
I don't like the term like that it was a race riot, because from what I saw, there's a certain demographic there, right? And I saw all sorts of shapes, creeds, and colors rioting and looting, but it fit the demographic of the population that lives there, right? So I don't like, because when you say it was a race riot, then you point a finger directly at one race, and I don't like that because that's not what I saw there. Just scrolling through these pictures, I saw all sorts of different colors rioting.
He was pulled out of his truck because he was white. How is that not a race riot?
But that was one example of one guy. There's another picture of a Hispanic lady who had been severely beaten, right?
And she was, because she was Hispanic. For some stupid reason.
Some people are never going to see it differently, and some people are going to change their perspective of it. But I agree with you that it wasn't so much race or any one race. It was a type of individual.
Exactly.
A non-lawful type who basically felt emboldened. Well, and then
I don't think we can put it all, because there were some people out there that were of the same kind of demographic that were out there preaching and holding the Bible and asking them to stop, like they were trying to police their own community, right? And there was guys going out there and doing that, and there was guys who were saving people and seeing it on air and jumping in, and so there definitely was good people out there doing stuff, and some of the pictures might make it look like all those people in the picture are bad, but I don't think that's the case. There was a lot of good people out there. Some people just wanted to watch. Right? Some people are just out there to watch. I don't think that a lot of the pictures do it justice on how many actual bad guys were doing all the bad crap.
Well, there's
actually very few for what the pictures show.
There's a million dispassionate views over that. I mean, I could say World War II was a race war. I mean, but because it was every side was racist against the enemy. I don't know. They still wanted to kill a lot of Jews over in Europe, and that's how my family got into it. So
you're changing the subject.
I don't think so. I'm allowed to talk about.
No, it's my show, and I'm allowed to be the whatever you call the host of the show. And I think I agree with you that it was, or when I was saying when you point fingers, you got fingers pointing back. So as much as it was the bad people, that element out there causing the trouble, there's also blame in the whole community or whatever to I don't want to say allow it, but to, like you were saying, the people that were watching, if you've got a leash on your kid or your friend or your husband or your wife or whoever it is out there, then there's some responsibility there too. But then, of course, the bigger responsibility, it's my show, the bigger responsibility, and the reason it's called a race war isn't because of fucking Dejanel Rennie, which is definitely a race thing, but it is also because of the guy that started the fucking whole thing, which was, what's his name? Can we all get along?
Rodney King.
Yeah, Rodney King, the original race issue that started the whole fucking thing, which was the straw that broke the camel's back of the race issue with the LA police. And
I don't even like to think that it was a race issue more than just a civil rights issue and abuse of power and unjust and a lot. It was a lot of things, but I think as long as we keep like pointing fingers and saying, "Oh, like that was a race issue," that's what keeps it alive, man. You know what I mean? I seriously think that it could have been any color doing what he did that night, and they probably would have beat down any similar type of guy. You know, I really do.
I remember.
Yeah, when the police get to a point where they have no consequence, then it gets to that point, and then it gets to the point where there's the straw that breaks the
What I
camel's back.
remembered was the police chief did not want to deploy any police into any racial minority area for fear of offending all his political overlords. That's what most people who lived in LA remember. The police just left and said, "Okay, we aren't going to intervene." They just didn't show up.
Right, and you can continue to keep saying that all you want, as if that's all that was into it. But I'm going to hold accountable the media helicopters, the television helicopters that reported to the world as that was happening, that it happened. And then as soon as the violence started happening and they saw their ratings start to add up like dollar signs in a cash register, they started to feed the flames. So I agree with you that the police didn't have good response and that they didn't have good planning, and that they basically started the whole thing with their attitude and their actions up till it. And there's no excuse for the individuals that rioted. But I'm going to throw as much blame on those television helicopters. That's the part of it that turned it into a riot that killed billions of people. There's all kinds of police horrible shit that happens in neighborhoods that have enough of it, and it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. And when that happens individually, all the times it's happened as instances, and the police walk away, that's probably the best thing to do. I don't think the police came up with that strategy for the first time out of nowhere in 1992, and then it was a failure. I think that was probably the go-to action when they fuck up, is to get the fuck out of there and not keep pressure on it. Unfortunately, when you add what we originally were talking about here is the beginning of 24-hour news cycle, or that element of the 24-hour news cycle and the competitive nature of the media, who's not just bloodthirsty, but interested in keeping our attention and to amplify any little thing to be the worst thing ever. We started this whole thing with HVS's insight that this didn't seem like such a big deal when you lived there and you knew it was just a few blocks being affected. And sure, millions of dollars can burn down in a few blocks when you have a highly dense area of one of the biggest cities on the planet. And yeah, you burn down a few blocks, it's going to cost billions of dollars. And when it's happened violently, it's horrible. But that's
it
the
is
whole
horrible,
thing here.
but it only affected like 0.0000001% of LA.
Yeah,
And
when you can't,
but
then
you could tell
that's
that by the
not a
media.
big thing. My show, quit fucking talking over me. And then again, the fact that the helicopters were up there is the part that I find the most, what's the word? Like
Egregious.
Yeah, but I mean, like, different about this one. Because like I said, I'm sure police have been assholes. Obviously, they were assholes enough in just LA to get it to where when they beat the shit out of Rodney King, all this shit happened. Well, it wasn't the first time they beat the shit out of somebody. So they've been beating the shit out of people for a while. But those helicopters being there, and this probably wasn't the first time. I'm sure there was other times that the helicopters were around. This wasn't the first time they did it. It's just whatever, like where they say all the moons aligned this time around. And it just became, maybe there was enough slow stuff happening, or maybe there was something else happening nefarious. And this was the
Are you saying that people rioted because there were helicopters?
They knew where to riot because they knew where the police
the rioting amplified to the point it did because of the helicopters, yes. And not just the helicopters, the fact that they were saying, the police just left and the police are standing over there, look. And they were like, look, there's the police way over there. And then look, all of this is happening right here. And then look, the police aren't doing nothing. And then look, now there's more people underneath of us. And then look, the police are still over there. Look, now there's even more people underneath of us. And we know that was happening because, like we just talked about, when Reginald Denny got his ass kicked, he was almost killed, pulled out of his truck, racially based riot, fucking murderous riot, pulled him out of his truck, started killing him on tape, right? On live, shouldn't say tape, on live helicopter footage, and the media was eating that shit up. What happened? Some dude came out of his house. And
then it was a media provoked riot, or at least inflamed.
Well, I think there's lasting effects with the whole helicopter thing to this day, because it's really in only LA that I hear about how people steal cars and go on high-speed pursuits just to be on the helicopter news, right? And there's every single day there's high-speed pursuits with helicopters following every day in LA, right? Like that's a really common thing.
Oh yeah, beeper alerts. So whenever there was like you could sign up for beeper alert. So whenever there was a high on TV, you get a beeper. Then everybody would stop what they were doing and turn on the TV to watch the car chase.
In '92, it was like that.
I don't remember when in '92.
No, after. Yeah. No, I'm saying I think that the whole helicopter of this footage like kind of started a thing about news companies having more helicopters in the air, always having helicopters, and just because I think that they learned how valuable that having a helicopter was, right? So I think they all learned from that, and they all have helicopters in LA now, if not 2 or 3 of them. All those news channels do. And all they do is they have a helicopter up in the air all day long, looking for crime and high-speed car chases. And
it was a police scanner, and then they send the helicopter up. But what I remember is that everything in town, at least at my studio, everything stopped if there was a live chase on TV or a Laker game. So those were the 2 things that just everything stopped, and people stopped what they were doing, and they stopped for Magic and Kareem, or they stopped for a live car chase. But to me, the riots, I lived in LA, and it didn't affect me or anyone I knew at all. So I just think it was a lot of media hype, like G-Webs was saying. They were intentionally trying to make money off of it. And if it bleeds, it leads. That's not new.
That isn't new. What's new is that maybe it wasn't new, but it was new on the national scene, that when they can take their helicopters, that, like you're saying, I think they had to make a decision at one point, even in a town as big as LA. Do we keep a helicopter in the air all the time, or do we wait and get it powered up when we need it, and then it'll take some amount of time to get to where we're going? And before this, they would have said, yeah, we'll just get there when we get there. Who cares? But when the media, the savage asshole fucks that are the media, when they figured out that they could have a live helicopter sitting on top of news and affect news, they knew that, right? It's not like the olden days where they're like, oh, we should be standing over here and observe. Like, we can't influence. That's not our job, right? No, they're standing up above it. And they were like, wow, when we stand above it and show everybody where the police are and are not, we literally can watch it happen. We can create news underneath of us.
And because olden days again.
What?
Can you define olden days again? Because sometimes you talk about olden days.
That's right. So that's what I'm saying, is that there was a difference there. And that's when, once they figured that out, then, well, now if we keep a copter in the air, we're going to be the first ones there. And if we got a copter in the air and we're the first ones there, maybe we can, XYZ, who knows what the hell goes through their minds.
Largest steal audience share from other channels, make more money. I mean, if you were running a business and you had to do something, and you could, instead of making like $1 million a night for running a broadcast or losing money, you could make like $10 million in one day by covering this shit and inciting a riot. What would you do? I mean,
so whether or not it was impactful on the individuals or whatever, I think the reason I have it in the calendar here isn't to fetishize the thing or to penalize anybody or to scold anybody, but to not forget and to put some insight as to what, that's one thing that adjusted the future that we live in today. It's something that we have to look back on when they say, why do you need an AR-15? This is 1992. This is before a lot of people were born who are going to ask that question today, but it's not out of their like awareness. It's within their parents' lifetime.
Well, I got
in that.
I got through the LA riots, and all I had was in 1911. So,
Very great.
but why don't you just leave it at, let's just blame old people for this one and move on.
So, I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to throw in there, Dead Horse, on the riots?
Just I hope that we can learn from it and not repeat it, and but I do think it's a good example on a lot of things to do with the 2A on why to be prepared, why to own a gun, and how a gun can be an equalizer. And I think it's a perfect example to point to, no matter how big you want to think it was or wasn't. It's still, no matter what, it's still a perfect example to point to, that there's people who saved their livelihoods, their businesses, and their homes because they owned a firearm.
I agree. And in a way that they didn't ever, well, there was some firing of them, but it wasn't a war. It wasn't a shootout. It wasn't even a bravado thing. It was just a necessity. It was a rational, pragmatic solution to a mob. And a mob is a non-directed, like without goal or without intention, right? It's just, in this case, it was an arsonist mob that was just out to loot or to partake in the chaos. And that was creating fires and stuff. And since human beings were starting those fires, it wasn't like just coming down from the sky or whatever. Again, the one thing that they could do is stand on their roofs. And there was some M1 carbines. So it would be an interesting thing to go through and look at some of those pictures. Most of the pictures you showed were like ground level of the carnage, let's say, like burning and stuff. But there were quite a few pictures when I was doing my research back then. Quite a few pictures from the people themselves who were like taking pictures, of them, over their own shoulders, kind of thing. Probably a little bit of congratulations or success, like it worked, like we stood up here and it stopped the mob, kind of thing. And if you think I just removed you for disagreeing with you, you're wrong. I disagreed with you, or I removed you because you were completely just derailing what I was trying to accomplish here. And I guess it's my fault for leaving the link out there for anybody to join. You didn't get banned, he got removed, and everyone can see that I removed him to the green room, which just is taking him off of the main screen. To remove him would then be remove, right? To eject him, and I didn't do that. He decided to leave when he was brought to the green room. He's just derailed it enough, so I'll keep moving. I don't do these shows just to chat to one individual. I do them so that we archive something that maybe somebody will pick up on and give us a little chance to have a conversation. That's what it's all about. So, I think the LA riots are a unique situation where just the presence of firearms, just having them on your rooftop in your hands, which is the same as having them on your front porch in your hands, or in the driveway in your hands, right? In the front window in your hands. It's that universal understanding, just like a torch or a club, right? A mammal with a implement in their hand is a sign, and just that alone, it can be comforting for the individual, I suppose. But again, pragmatically, is there a safer solution? We know that it wasn't a lack of law enforcement. There was plenty of law enforcement in LA in '92, and it wasn't a lack of resources. They had everything at their disposal, but it happened. The riot, the murderous arsonist situation happened in a few days, and it got to a level where it was no longer within the cities or the counties or the states or the nation's ability to put immediate control on it. And in those situations, what did the individuals, those human beings in that area, have to as resources? And what they had was long guns, and those long guns saved.
I think it's something that I bet you, if you could go back and find the numbers, I bet you the following weeks, gun sales rose, background checks rose, concealed carry permits rose. I bet you that affected the entire country. You know, maybe even other countries. You know, like, oh, if that can happen in America, you know, I mean,
these years. So it had to, other, like you say, other people, a lot of people had to be aware of it. It was the first time something like that happened in my generation, or our generation, right?
yeah, I can't remember any, actual riots I think that was the first one that I remember. There could have been, ones before that, maybe in the late '70s, but I was too. I would have been too young to recall those. That's definitely the first one that I was old enough to really, you know, kind of grasp why it was happening, like what was going on and the severity of it.
Now, as far as we're about the same age or whatever, did it change you at all? Like, say, for me, it was when I was already out of the house and living on my own. So it was the first time I had to think about firearms. Now that I think about it, it was the first time I thought about firearms as like, oh, wait a minute, I shouldn't, I have a lot of toys. I have a lot of stuff to play with out in the desert out here. But I needed more CCW type of stuff. I wanted more home defense type of stuff. So it got me kind of thinking smarter.
I was taking a civics class, and we were watching it every day in school just for that civics class. So for like 45 minutes a day, we'd watch it for like 30 minutes and then talk about it for 15 minutes. And then that took up like pretty much that whole semester of that civics class. That just became our focus, was even after it was all over talking about it. It changed like a whole school year for me. I mean, that just became our primary focus, was those riots. It was really big news.
Oh, interesting. I wasn't even in school. I don't know if I was in school. I might have been in school. If it was, I don't remember it, like anybody focusing on it. But maybe they did.
And I just remember every news channel you turned to, it was on and they talked about it, and that just all local news kind of really ceased. And I just kind of remember the whole country being focused on what was going on in LA.
Yeah.
Usually we were just, worried about what was going on in our own town or state, but the whole country, just all eyes were on LA.
And I'm trying to, and there must be something out there. There's a book about social media, how social media affects Second Amendment reporting or coverage or something like that. And if I'm wondering if there's a book out there that would be about the media and like maybe the development of the media or something like that, and then so that we would have somebody who's actually put some effort into it, who would know more of the bigger, the bird's eye view of it all, where this is, because like you're saying, there might have been like coverage, like if the Olympics were somewhere, or I don't know, snow, like Mount St. Helens, I guess that was another thing. We forgot about Mount St. Helens, right? So there was other things that were national coverage, or maybe an earthquake, but usually things were like an earthquake, or maybe Mount St. Helens is an example of something that doesn't have a finite end date or whatever. But this was it got national attention, and it was something that was an unknown. Who knows how long this is going to last, and how long. I guess the media is thinking, how long can we milk it, or how long can we keep the attention on this? And everybody else is thinking, like, how big is this going to get? Now, obviously, this happened worldwide or nationally with JFK and with Martin Luther King and stuff like that. But that was years earlier in black and white TV, right? Like that, it was still different when it happened, in '92, where there's VCRs and cable TV and helicopters. All the big stuff that happened in the past was barely live, and definitely no VCRs or anything. Black and white TV days.
And didn't some of the first body cams come out right after that, and so that kind of changed the way like policing is done.
Oh, because of Rodney King, they might have come out with body cam, or at least not body cams, but the car cams, right?
Yeah.
Because Rodney King was just some guy. Well, there was VCRs, and you probably wouldn't have had Rodney King if there wasn't VCRs. If somebody wouldn't have had ability, because there wasn't like 8mm film or something that somebody got that on, right?
It was VHS camcorder, yeah.
So they probably figured out real quick after that like for liability and for all the different reasons, like let's put these cameras in cop cars. And I don't know the actual history of it, but that had to happen, right?
Well, even if they were starting to put, cameras in cars before that, I think that probably influenced, the lawsuits that came after and stuff like that, right? So I bet that influenced a lot of police departments and changed the way law enforcement was done after that, right? It probably trained training for law enforcement officers. It probably, dash cams, I mean, just that changed a whole, career field, right? Like the way it was done.
No, seriously, I had to. I did take some law enforcement classes, but it was years before that. But I'll bet you, yeah, it had to, because it was 100% a direct result of law enforcement, right? Everything about it was law enforcement influence, negatively mostly. So I don't know if John is a different name, but it's a new name that I'm seeing. Welcome. It says, I remember the coverage last year led me to do my own research for a couple weeks. And that's why we all need ARs, right on. And then I guess this is for you, Dead Horse. John's asking, was that instructor pro or anti-gun? And did the instructor try to slant that class? I guess when he's talking about when you said that the school was talking about it.
Oh, it was a teacher, and it was a civics class. And then what was it? And because I took civics, like that's just like a required thing here. And so what year was it? Was it like 2 years after that the OJ thing happened? And again, that whole semester of civics again was devoted to OJ Simpson. So that was just kind of the way that thing. But those 2 years were like everything else, all the other years of civics were just kind of normal. But those 2 years completely focused on those two cases for the whole school year. So I don't think you slanted anything, but we definitely talked about it.
Well, plus it was in Utah, right? So I'm guessing
Yeah.
it'd have to be Midland to conservative, right? The school back in the day. Let's see. So otherwise, yawning now. So that's when I got rid of my Tech 22 and got a 38. Figured it's time to have a gun I can carry in my pocket instead of this dumbass gun I couldn't even really holster or nothing. Tech 22 is that stupid 1022 mag coming off the front. And in 92, there was no such thing as a BX 25. So the best you could get would have been Butler Creeks, I think.
Yep, Butler Creek.
I think it was something aftermarket, and they weren't cheap. They weren't used, and I was not rolling with money or nothing. And
Butler Creeks and Eagle Lights.
well, that's the thing. There was like 3 other ones. There was also that like belt, like that drum one with a rubber band in it, like a little rubber thingy. And they weren't cheap, and there was no internet. So you would go to a gun show and you would just have to buy something, and if it didn't work, then you'd have to look for something else maybe and buy it. And then if it worked, okay, you buy 3 of them. If it didn't, you're buying 3 no matter what. You're either testing ones that didn't work or you found ones that worked and you bought a couple, but it was all money. So for me, it was time to get a 38 instead of a 22. And yeah, I mean, I guess someone's got to put you into the mindset when you're young. I don't know, maybe that's different. I mean, I guess it's maybe different nowadays that there's internet and stuff. As soon as you start buying a pistol, you start hearing about CCW. This is 92. It wasn't like there was CCW. That wasn't a thing. If you own guns, great. Like you got guns in your closet and you went hunting maybe, or you went to the range, but nobody was carrying guns around. Cops carried guns around. Criminals carried guns around. So when was it in Arizona that they got concealed carry? My list here. Arizona 94. So it was 2 more years before Arizona would even have such a thing as concealed carry. It was misdemeanor though, and that was pretty well known that it was a misdemeanor to carry. So question how many people you think carried in Arizona pre 94.
it was all open carry everywhere. That because open carry. So
Well, you
pretty
could
much, and then
for
some
sure.
states had open carry without a round in the chamber. You know, some states had open carry where you could actually have it loaded, but that's all there was open carry.
I'll just say that I don't think I know anybody that didn't just carry because it was a misdemeanor. They would most of the time if you were carrying, and there would no way anybody would ever know, except that something might happen or something. Somebody would then they'd go, "Hey, take that gun and put it in the car." So it was never even an issue. And then they just made it like I guess sanctioned or whatever when I started doing the CCW. But um, the riots got you into EDC. It wasn't so much the riots as much as for me it was the realization that because I wasn't like going home and paying attention to the news or nothing. I was in school at the time and living life, as a young kid, just away from doing things on my own or whatever. So I wasn't really watching the news or nothing. It's just that the way that it was focused so heavily on it, and the way that they, I was saying before, that the way that they were recovering it, it was like, look, this is on fire. This is on fire. This many people. I mean, it's basically the same as the COVID death focus, right? It was just a manipulative, intense, daily barrage of coverage. And then because the mainstream media, the main news channels were doing it, then everything else, like the Rush Limbaughs and the local radios and the overnight stuff.
And it wasn't just for the 6 days that it went on. I mean, this was for months after.
Oh, yeah.
If they weren't talking about Rodney King, they were talking about the riots. It was one or the other.
Right, because of the healing and the rebuilding and the consequences, and then pointing and what happened and how did it, how can this never happen again? And you got to heal what caused the whole thing. You got to repair the ineptitude of what their response was, and then literally hold people responsible, well, all the criminals and the cops.
Yeah, all those trials that followed after, and yeah, those were all heavily publicized.
It didn't ever happen. I think the worst consequences of the whole thing is the media was never, or at least it was never like in mass. The media was never pointed at as a cause or an influence. Or
do we really need a live feed from a helicopter? Like, honestly, I'm okay with getting my news an hour later or something, right? Like, if it means saving people's lives.
I could see the police using it effectively.
Yeah, the police. But I'm just talking for like us, people, like when your enemies kind of using that as a weapon, right, or whatever, or bad guys are using that as a weapon against them, and it might be causing the death of innocent people or bodily injury or who knows what, because they're using that information, that live information. Like, I'd be okay with a 20-minute or half an hour or whatever it is time limit on that. Like we're like
delayed, right? Even if it was
delayed.
A 5-minute delay would have prevented some of the instances, and that might be what they do now. I mean, I don't know. Do we know? I don't know. They might put a 30-second delay or a 5-minute delay when they're doing stuff nowadays for that. Hopefully, they're not heartless idiots that don't understand that they were part of it. But anyway, so that's one of the things when like you're saying, there must have been some focus on the media at the time. I'm sure somebody was, hey, wait a minute, somebody must have realized it, but there wasn't any long term. Nobody shuns the media as a whole or anything because from it. And we pretty much saw the same thing happen in Ferguson, right? Like they were sitting there, you could tell the cameras that were there, the media sources that were there were basically, waiting for their money shots or their violence or whatever.
Well, and they're so powerful and there's so much money there, it's hard to attack them. Like, anyone who attacks them kind of gets squashed, right? Ruined. And it's and if you're in that career field, like you're a reporter or something like that, like, good, if you badmouth like one news agency for doing, like, I mean, good luck getting a job anywhere else, right? I mean, that's just kind of like the way that I think works. So they're almost untouchable.
Right. It actually fueled them. They definitely went more into it instead of looking at it rationally or changing anything. So John was saying, interesting that the riots got you into EDC carry. Actually, they got me to to sell the. I didn't have a lot of money, so I had to trade the Tech 22 for the 38, and it wasn't to carry it every day. It was just that I'd have a gun that I could carry. Like I said, carrying every day wasn't in the zeitgeist. That wasn't a thing people thought about. Now, if you were going hunting or something, you didn't think twice about carrying a gun with you, something like that. But it's not like yeah, I didn't get it for like carrying to school or anything. I didn't carry until years later after I had done some classes. Because like a lot of people, I think I just didn't. I've never been robbed. Like I said, it's not true either. But I hadn't been whatever worried about carrying a gun or anything. So I went to a few, as a gun person, went to a few CCW classes and stuff, and then had my what's the word? My eyes opened to the reasons to carry. And again, it's that awareness. You can't be told awareness, right? You can lead a horse to water kind of thing. You can tell people that the water's great and it's good reason to drink it and it's cool and it's refreshing and all that, but unless they're thirsty, unless they got a reason to drink, all you can do is allow people to understand, or give them the opportunity to understand. But so that the riots weren't enough to make me want to carry every day. Now, maybe if I would lived in LA or something, it'd been a little bit different, but they happened, stayed over from me. I don't know. I mean, there's still probably some money drive there because whoever's first is going to get more views, and that gives you a better.
It's all advertising dollars. I mean, the more viewers they have, the more they can sell their advertising slots for people to put commercials on. And I don't think that they have any morals or care what they post, as long as they think it's what's going to get them the most viewers, right? And get more people to tune into their channel, and more shocking headlines to make people look, and more outlandish things. And I think that's just like what turns the world. Money makes the world go round. I think it's no different for the media. The bottom line is the bottom dollar. So
I think it's kind of 2 hours into the show and it's the middle of the night. HVS is already gone, but I don't disagree, but I also would say that if it was only money, then I think that they could show things like kittens and like koala bear babies and stories of like the mom cat that goes in and saves all her kittens and burns off all their whiskers in the process, but then the fire department puts them in a blanket and everything's good and they get all adopted. If there was, that would get them ratings, that would get them views, and it would be a pleasant, like happy version of the commerce that takes place. And if everyone was watching, and I'm just using that as an example, obviously, if it could be who wins the spelling bee or the innovations in medical science or nonprofit.
I think they do. I just don't think they could back then because of the technology and stuff like that. But nowadays,
at any time, I think if they wanted to focus on things like that, and they only focused on things like that without and just a passing news coverage of the atrocities and horrible things, just so people are aware, but not with a focus on the bleeds it leads kind of garbage. I believe that if it's cute, it brings in change also. It's just that I guess what I'm getting at is I think they aren't, like you said, something like you don't think that they're looking at it morally. I think there's a point that could be made, and you'd have to change my mind, that they are almost immoral. Like they've decided to go with the bleeds it leads. Like I say, I believe that they could go with other things and make money. They've decided to go with the things that make money the way that they do, because they see it, I think, as easier to burn things down than it is to find things that are being built.
Oh, I definitely agree with that they're going that direction. I see them going all directions though. So with today's technology and cable and satellite and everything, and you can have 100 channels on your TV. So like some of the things I've seen, say like 6 different guys or companies own the majority of all the different networks, not just news, but we're talking like movie channels and TV show channels and stuff like that, right? So now they can branch out. So now they have their 24-hour, if it bleeds it, it gets views news. And then they got their kitten channel, like, and their animal channel, and their beauty makeup channel, and their, and it's all underneath that parent company. But now they're advertising to everyone. So if there's that, whatever kind of mindset the people are, but unfortunately, they get the, what I like to call rubberneckers, who slow down to look at, for the accident and stuff, right? And they get a lot of those, and they get a lot of views, so they definitely push that probably harder than the other ones. And outlandish headlines and anything shocking and attractive, and it's kind of just, I definitely agree with you on the immoral thing, but I think they go after all gambits, like everything that they think can get views, they're willing to try to get money. Like reality TV. I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw a reality TV show that was anything close to being good, or true reality TV.
I don't yes, I do all angles, and hopefully we'll see that it changes a little bit. When you count reality TV, when you count, like I've seen some of these things that are like magic trick shows or singing or just stuff like that. That's just trivial, like entertainment stuff. That's not good anybody probably. But when you're talking like reality, like the kicked in the nuts, or like making fun of people, or watching people not get married, or whatever, those kind of shows, those can be less useful, I suppose, for everything, right?
Oh, definitely. And I think that they're out to get money. I really do. I think whatever they're willing to do, they're willing to sell their soul for money, and for, for ratings, and for advertising dollars. And that's unfortunately a lot of companies, when they become publicly traded and they're big and they have to answer to a board of directors and they have to answer to stockholders. That's how they get. It's just like a natural thing. It becomes quote unquote business, right? And the morals go out the window, and the, trying to do a good thing or even help anybody goes out the window. And it's all about bottom dollar, making a profit, making your shareholders happy. That's all. It's just a business. That's how they're running it. And that's sad, because it's supposed to be, unofficially, the best branch of our government that's supposed to keep our government in check.
Well, you're talking like the state or whatever, the press.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I had a discussion with somebody. We'll end it on this one. So we're like basically 2 hours in. I'll rant for 3 minutes here. I keep saying this thing. The baby boomers have something like 20% of influence going into this election. The kids that were born that are going to be 18. So that means they were born, since in the last 20 years, that they, never seen anything besides Amazon and smartphones and high-speed internets and, Netflix, basically. So, they just live in a different world. The baby boomers, our parents, that generation, they grew up on the television. Now, they invented the hardware that the internet lives on. They invented it kind of, but then they pretty much left the software to everybody else. They quit dealing with the internet a long time ago, and they don't really go to the internet too often, in the big sense. So those networks, the NBC, the CBS, the CNNs, like, who are they really talking to? Do you really think they're talking to these kids that are 21 years old? I think a lot of that noise is going out to that generation, that 20% influence or whatever. And I keep saying it, but we'll find out, I guess, here pretty quick after this election. We'll find out if their influence starts to dwindle, or if I'm wrong and somehow they capture the influence with the younger set. But after this election, once our baby boomers are gone and they have no more influence and there's no reason to peddle to them, except for their money, I would think that we're going to start seeing less and less and less influence on those things. And like you say, everybody's got so much varied interest or whatever. I think we're going to see a lot more of the, just the whatever, the individual projects, individual content creation, individual communities grow up and focused on areas of interest or locations and that kind of thing. Especially with this month of maybe 2 months of people getting a chance to, telecommute and focus on online interactions. I'm hoping that we're going to really see a big bite out of those. Well, the media that existed in '92, that was kind of the focus of most of this chat. Yeah, that was pretty close. That was 1 minute and 59 seconds. So, anyway, Ted, you want to say anything else out there before we head out?
Join a Pro 2A organization today. Your choice.
Sounds good. That's a good idea. And let's see, it's about to be the second of the month, so it'd be a good time to do one for the Every Second Matters awareness campaign. With that said, I am the king of the internet, and anybody that disagrees with me, I'm going to invite you on my show and then kick you off on my show because I'm always right.